Hey, welcome back to the Kingsway podcast. I know, weird voice to hear right here at the beginning, but
Not that weird.
Not that weird. Hey, you know me. I'm Jed, here with Trevor, always around. Doing something a little different today. I'm excited. We've been doing this series through John for a little while.
The Gospel of John.
Yeah, the Gospel of John. Started. What was it? Last summer we started it.
Yeah, we did
Something like
last summer. I think we just summers are normally a little low.
Yeah.
But then also I really do like doing just exegesis off a passage or a book. And the Gospel of John is the oldest gospel.
Yeah.
And well, debatable, but
Some
to the most, I would say it's the oldest gospel. And yeah.
Also, I totally just dived right in, just jumped right in that.
You didn't do an intro or anything.
Really anything. No, just said,
it doesn't
hey.
matter if they're listening. They're here.
Yeah.
They know it's our weekly thing.
Yeah.
I know that, like you said, this is something we talked about before multiple times on the podcast, but want to do it a little differently I think today.
So we started this last summer, Gospel of John, and kind of took a break for a while, went through a couple different series, and then came back this summer. And for me, I know this has been kind of one of my favorites. I like the Gospel of John. I think it's interesting hearing people, because I feel like it's the one that's recommended the most for especially new Christians, people that kind of asking questions about it. But I feel like for people who have been reading the Bible and kind of following for a long time, they think this is really confusing.
It is, and
so it's weird because it's like, if it can be so much more rich if you know a lot of the things that John alludes to, but even in its simplicity of just going into it, realizing all he wants to do is tell you some stories about Jesus to help you believe.
Yep. It is full Shrek. It's full Shrek. There are layers to it, like crazy. It's full Shrek. I mean, it really is. There are so many layers to this gospel. And you're right.
Yeah. So coming in, we're like, what would it be? Something like halfway through it.
We're almost
chapter 12.
We're almost straight up halfway through it. I would say the climax of John's gospel is what we just finished a few weeks ago, chapter 11. And so
Lazarus and dead,
ultimately the end of chapter 11 kind of gives you the introduction of like the whole fall of Jesus coming all the way to the cross. So like his fall from grace completely with the Pharisees, his fall from grace with the Sadducees, they kind of unite finally in their opinions. They can't unite on anything else, but they finally are like, this guy's bad news. And, they kind of just say we had to kill him. And so they start to, as before they desired it in the moment. Now it's like a plot. Like beyond belief, like not like a question them, not to like discredit him, like we need him dead. So
basically the idea of today is we just want to take a minute here and kind of the halfway point of John and look back over. I have a few questions that I want to ask you, just talking about kind of just in general, just over the whole series.
Well, I'll do my best because it's been over a year since we started it, but at the same time, these
are really general questions.
It sounds really
so
fun.
It should be
it sounds really fun. I'm excited.
Yeah, so we'll jump right in. The first question that I kind of have is, I remember talking about, I guess over a year ago now, what we're going to look at next, what series we want to go through, and then talking about this idea of just going through John. What was it both a year ago back then, and then at the start of the summer, again, thinking about coming back to it? What was it that kind of pulls you into it? What made you excited to talk through the book? And
that's a great question. I know when we originally talked, that was, finding passion behind when you're preaching something can be a week-to-week struggle, especially when you do it consistently. And so, kind of ramping yourself up for a series is almost like maybe a tribute to, like, I've never been a musician, but it's probably like ramping yourself up for a tour of you're trying to get excited about what you're teaching, what you're playing. You're kind of get excited about, what you're going towards, not just what you're doing in the moment. And so, looking through the Gospel of John, Tim Mackey, the Bible Project, reading several and listening to several people that were teaching and talking about the book of John. And then also having a lot of new believers that I was in conversations with that theologically they're asking questions about God, they're asking questions about faith, they're asking questions like, well, how do we know, when we're in and when we're out, and like it really just came down to like I just had enough moments where I just went, this book would be the clarifying thing to
Yeah.
walk through. And I had suggested it to so many people, and I talked to so many people individually outside of the sermon series
Mhm.
itself, and before we even started, that it felt like a natural flow. And then when I started studying John itself, and I started to go, okay, John 21, 26,
Yeah.
I wrote all these things so you would come to believe that Jesus is the Christ. And,
Mhm.
like those, when you read that statement at the very end of the book, he's not told you that until then.
Yeah.
This is why I wrote all this.
Yeah.
You get to that and you're like, wow. So it really is kind of this like movie moment where the dad has laid out all the, like I just picture
Mhm.
like the son at the father's, deathbed, and the dad lays out this story.
Yeah.
And kind of like Princess Bride almost, but reverse. The
Yeah.
grandpa's laying there, and and he's laying it out. And at the end, he kind of tells why he's been telling him all this. He's like, I tell you this not just so you'll know about Jesus,
Yeah.
not so you'll think he's cool, not so he did some great things. It's so that you would actually put your faith in him.
Yeah.
And I knew that.
Yeah.
So going into the series, that was what was exciting. And then knowing we hadn't got there yet, like I've
Mhm.
obviously mentioned that several times, but
Yeah.
the climax and like of John 11, especially where we just got to, and then knowing what that is leading towards ultimately with Jesus on the cross, it's an exciting book to continue to pursue. And John just doesn't lose focus of it.
Yeah.
Everything he writes
Yeah.
is so intentional in that. So the exciting part was just walking through that for sure.
Yeah. I even love just how like you mentioned, just with all the new believers and stuff, as you're thinking through them, kind of what they would want to hear and the questions they're asking and stuff. I feel like not that Matthew, Mark, or Luke don't, but John does this awesome job of really tying in how Jesus comes in and fulfills all the Old Testament stuff, and how the Old Testament points towards him, and actually kind of brings some relevancy to that. Makes it.
He does such a good job artistically doing it. I mean, he is not a fat guy. He's not like, he trims the fat. Like everything in his book has a purpose, from the 7 miracles to the 7 signs to the 7 names of Christ to, there's just everything has a point. So anything you're reading or a statement that's there, or even the illustrations of light and dark that we've talked about, light being, faith, and darkness being doubt. And anytime you see those two things, they have those two ties together. Light is life, and dark is death, and doubt and life and faith. And so even the context of like the stories and stuff may not be even told realistically in the sense of like recording it accurately, but done stylistically in the sense of like recording it and writing it in a way that you would see what's going on behind the story, even though the story itself has historical backing. So like when you read John 1 and it says in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. When you read that, it immediately, if you're his audience, ties it to Genesis. And so where Matthew uses the genealogy to prove who Jesus is and to talk about where he came from, John just goes, no, just know this was a part of the plan. This was the plan from the beginning. The Word is how God created the world, and it's powerful, and it's still moving. It was powerful then, it's going to be powerful now, so just wait. Just a great artistic style to pull the reader in, even still. It's really cool. You're right.
And then even just like you mentioned in towards the end of the book, whenever he kind of gives his purpose of writing and says,
lays it out.
I've written all these things that you may believe, and by believing you may have life in his name. Like that's when he directly says it, right? But then you in the beginning of the book in John chapter 2 and 3, he kind of indirectly slides that in.
And he like tells you a story, and then he interjects himself in there with kind of his thoughts.
It's kind of like I'm thinking of in chapter 2 when Jesus clears the temple, and he kind of makes this claim of divinity that he's God, he's God's son, and then John 3:16 that
out of the Nicodemus story and out of like that moment of complete intimacy with the leader of the faith, he's like John introduces himself to say like, hey, I just want to make sure if you're the reader and you're unclear of what's going on, John lays it out 3:16 and 17 that I think are just great, like clarifiers, because I don't think he wants you to miss it because he wants you to get it at the end. No, it's still true.
I love that. It just kind of indirectly slides that in, and then takes the whole book to reinforce it, and then at the end is like, all right, this is what I've been doing the whole time.
Well, and it's meant to be something that you read multiple times. I mean, that's part of the reason why coming back to it made sense, because my hope, and even as I've been teaching it again, is that people are rereading it, not just the sections or but like reading sections of John and having it speak. And Yeah, there's just so many good things. I mean, we still haven't gotten to some of my favorite
Yeah.
stuff. John 15 is probably one of my favorite sections that we
Yeah.
haven't got to yet.
John 17 would be
John
mine.
7, yep,
Yeah,
see,
love that.
What's John 17? I don't have
That's
those.
when Jesus prays for his disciples.
Yep,
It's just like that priestly prayer, the whole chapter. And
Oh, that's so good. I
love
forgot
it.
about that. Well,
Yeah.
see, I just have that John 15, I am the vine and you are the
Yeah.
branches, and
Oh,
just laying out, some of the stuff of like how you abide in me, and just, basically stay connected to Jesus is the key. And then obviously with the Holy Spirit bringing the temple mentality or tabernacle mentality of like, you're connected to me through the Holy Spirit, just as I was connected to my Father. It's just a beautiful showing that Jesus didn't just promise that, but then also gave the means and the tools to have it happen. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I know I just getting to hang out with you and talk with you a lot throughout all of this. I know that there are some weeks you wish you could go back and do again.
Absolutely.
And so that's kind of a question is, was an idea you wish you could maybe repurpose or repackage, or even a passage that you wish you could approach differently?
Yeah, dude, that's so good. The hardest, I think the curse of everybody that ever teaches something, especially something that they're passionate about, is like the rewriting of that teaching.
Yeah.
Like there are very few weeks that I leave Sunday mornings and get to my house and don't think of 2 or 3 things that I could have said a little differently.
Yeah.
And then it's probably like once a month that I don't get to my house and have like, I should have said this. And like, I'm truly like, not just like little niches, but I'm just like, man, I should have mentioned this. One of the biggest ones that happened just back in John chapter 11 that I admitted that I shouldn't have admitted, that I think should have been a bit bigger of a point. Not that I loved my approach. I think that what God spoke through me, I hope, was meaningful and I think impactful, and it was good. John 11, the first 22 verses, just so incredibly powerful to pain and suffering, and how Jesus is coming to approach death and basically provide hope in the midst of all that. And when John records Jesus weeping when Mary, the sister of Lazarus, come and has the emotional response of like, why didn't you come and save my brother? You saved others. And Jesus weeps. It says he's deeply moved, and then he goes to the tomb, and then he's deeply moved again. And the thought process there is the full weight of his responsibility is there. And one of the things that I wanted to tie together is the temptations of Jesus. When Jesus is tempted in John chapter 2, at the end of chapter 2, there's this question. The last temptation is, if you bow to me, I'll give you everything. And the thought process behind that is the means to achieve his end, it was going to be painful.
Yeah.
Not only for him, but for those around him. And there's a temptation to want to do it a different way, right? And saving Lazarus a different way would have saved some pain, but it would have ultimately not, proven his power.
If he would have like gotten there before he died,
he wouldn't have proven the power. And so there's this weight of that, of like knowing that he has to do it this way, where sin has to be proven of his consequence, proven of its pain, proven of its fullness to bring death. But he wants to probably spare his children, his creation from that.
Yeah.
And then there's the other side of the coin that knows that some aren't going to choose to follow him. And so I think the thought process is he's looking at this tomb and knowing that some won't come out. And that there's just pain in his heart to know that Lazarus is going to, but there are some that, even though he's willing to walk through that pain and do it the way, that ultimately it won't bring that fullness of the gospel. And so his heart breaks in that moment. And I think it's just a great display of the heart of God, is that he wants no one to fall away. And and that to me was something that I think I should have ended with on a greater level, and I didn't. Not that I don't think that message wasn't brought about in what I said, but I think that's a powerful aspect to it that I didn't draw out.
That's interesting, like, because I know John 11 was, I heard so many people say so many good things about that one. I even me personally, I was one that was impactful for me, like, and that I really enjoyed, and I thought like was one of your like
best of the last just month.
Like just like most put together and thought through and like I don't know. So that's funny.
So that's the one that I'm most critical with. And honestly, that's normally how it goes, is when I feel like I've like kind of wrung out the sponge.
Yeah.
And then I get to a corner that I missed. And I'm like,
Yeah.
dang it.
I
I
get
forgot
that.
that piece. Honestly, some of the most challenging things, just to piggyback on something that's less specific, is the section between 7 and 10 where he just does these festivals where it's like the festival, the Feast of the Tabernacles, and then like the the Festival of Lights, which is Hanukkah,
Yeah.
and then like the Sabbath and Day of Atonement. There's just all these things in here that he's bringing prominence to that I don't have the historical understanding from the Jewish perspective to like bring the full prominence of. So I'm like week to week trying to like learn a lifelong tradition that has like generational, like historical value and promise to the Jewish people, and then bring it into our context. It's overwhelming. There was several times, like Feast of the Tabernacles was probably the one that I was like, I have no idea what this is. And I have to preach on it for 2 weeks. I literally am learning as I'm going. And anybody that's a teacher out there, I know this, you just got to stay one page ahead of your students to teach.
Yeah.
I definitely felt like that. There was definitely times that I was talking to a couple of people in our church that have way more understanding and knowledge, and afterwards and going to like, do I need to recant anything I said? Do I need to change? Like I prayed about it, thought about it, I've done research, but like, did I get it right? And luckily I didn't have any like major things that I think I, got wrong. I did misquote a passage. I did. I like, it was a proverb or something, and I had it backwards. It was like 8:32, and I quoted like 8:23, and the context of it was similar enough that it worked. But I definitely had someone come up and go, "My reference is different," and I looked at it, I'm like, "Yeah, I'm dyslexic. Evidently, so is the Holy Spirit." So, because I missed that. But that stuff happens. I think if you can beat yourself all over, the thing I have solace in a lot is like. Peter evidently wasn't the best, or Paul wasn't evidently the best preacher, but God used him, and they say that multiple times. And Peter definitely had some anger issues.
That's true.
And so I'm like, maybe God can use my stupidity or my ignorance sometimes, and grant me some grace. No, I mean, there's lots of, I could go back and rewrite every single one. I would say half of them I'll never preach again, and I'd rewrite if I was to do it again. And then half of them I would work on, or maybe a third of them I would work on, and then probably like 5-10% I just preach them as they are. Mainly because the text just hits you so differently, and to recycle those from my own heart just wouldn't. I don't know. I'd have to really think about most of them to preach again.
That number is even higher than I expected. The ones that you would just preach.
Probably again. I mean, John 11's ones that I've preached multiple times, and I've never preached the same sermon on it twice. Yeah. So that just gives you I love it, and I love the passage, but every single time I'm like, I can't recycle this. I gotta figure out some fresh way to approach it. I just can't see myself doing. Maybe out of complete laziness over some of those festival ones, I might do it. I would hope that my soul would not let me. Yeah. But there's a deep part of me that knows I'm still broken and need Jesus, and I might just cop out, and I hope I wouldn't. But but yeah, no, it's a lot of, that's a really good question. Every week I think about it. Yeah.
Cool. That is a good answer. But let's talk about the flip side of that. Yeah. Thinking about, is there a week or a subject or and not that you want it like you said, just go back and change, but is there one that you really enjoyed, that you really liked?
Golly, that's a good question.
Whether even that's even what you felt was really impactful in, to the church, to Kingsway at the time, or.
I mean, I have preached a very similar message on Nicodemus in chapter 3 several times. In fact, I retaught it just a few weeks ago. The character of Nicodemus, or Nikolai, as I like to call him for those that don't know who Nicodemus is.
I always think of Nikolai Carpathia from Left Behind.
Yeah, okay. See, I never read I've never read.
Oh, I never read them either, but I watched the movies. Kirk Cameron, shout out.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, watch the
I was
Chosen.
homeschooled.
Watch
okay?
the Chosen.
I was homeschooled.
All right, watch the Chosen
forever. I was homeschooled forever.
Yeah, no, I love Nicodemus's story, and I think I see the modern church in his story a lot, and not in the sense of like we're completely Pharisaical in the sense of like we've completely lost our way, but we recognize that following Jesus a lot of times means tearing down our traditions and walking away from the things we think we know. Yeah. And then having like moments where we're in front of groups of people that we love and we respect and we have honor with, that we have to go ask the hard questions. Yeah. And We don't know the end of Nicodemus' story, which is the hardest part. We know like he goes with Josephus to get Jesus' body and he was present, and that's awesome. But we don't ever hear that he's like in.
And that's really interesting too, because you think he probably got some flack for that. The first time you meet him, he's meeting Jesus at dead of night to make sure nobody knows he's meeting. And then Jesus dies, and he's one of the ones to go grab his body and treat with respect and
$60,000 worth of basically like hush money to Pilate with Josephus, and then they're using an unmarked grave. The person that's crucified is never supposed to get a grave. Their bones are supposed to melt. That's why it was called the Golgotha Hill of Bones, because the skeletons and everything were supposed to be left right where they fell.
I didn't know that.
And so like even getting the body off a cross was not supposed to be allowed. It was supposed to be your eternal shame. And that's part of what the cross was supposed to be. That's why it's not just our guilt, it's our shame. That's what we talked about before.
Yeah.
Like he took care of our guilt on the cross, but the shame is outside of the city on this hill with all to see.
Yeah.
So that's why not only is your guilt washed away, but your identity is changed. Shame is your identity. Guilt is your consequence of your actions. So, Nicodemus taking on that shame and like bringing him back into, basically the family in the tomb is huge. Yeah. But again, we don't know. I mean, we can make assumptions. Yeah. James starts a really big church in Jerusalem, and I cannot see Josephus and Nicodemus not joining.
Yeah.
But we also know that Paul's on a really big power kick at that same time, and he's a Pharisee. So obviously there's or Saul, I should say, not Paul, but there's just a big movement. But John chapter 3, I think, is the one that I love the most about this whole thing that I've done. And obviously John 3:16 comes out of that, John 3:17, but it's more of just that story of just seeing this guy that John just kind of puts, kind of slices him in. And then at the end, it's curious that, he does that for Jesus's body. And then it's the end is all would come to believe, it's like Nicodemus too.
Yeah.
And it's well done. I think also watching The Chosen and having Nicodemus be a part of that and like his character is incredibly well done.
Yeah.
And they have the rooftop scene where he meets him at night, and it's powerful in that show. And
random question I just thought of.
Yeah.
Watching The Chosen, do you feel like there is a gospel that they lean more towards in the storytelling?
Like I honestly think that they are doing it like John, but it feels more like Luke to me.
Interesting. So like really detailed and
yes, it feels like John and Luke combined.
Okay.
To me, there's obviously Mark and Luke are very similar in their source work. Yeah. And so like Matthew's obviously the separate from those. It doesn't feel very Jewish. Okay. It feels very much more like a Gentile. Yeah. Because the way that they subtly bring things in or explain Jewish stuff, it feels much more that. And then there's just not a whole lot of detailed bogged down. They don't explain every little thing. My favorite part, just that you brought that up, is the fact that it's like John's gospel, where it's not everything's in it. Like there's no communion, there's no virgin birth. Yeah. There's just parts of that, The Chosen, that they just let you figure out what's going on and where they're at in the story and where's the chronological and what are they going to do next, and you're like, I don't know what are they following, and I like that they don't kind of have to stick with, because it does make like, where are they going now? They're going to a wedding. Oh, I know a little bit about that. What wedding? You probably went more than one. Is this the first one? Is this in Canaan? Oh, it's in Canaan. Ooh. Wait, Thomas is bringing the wine? Wait a second. So there's definitely parts of it that I don't know, as a Bible nerd, it really was fun. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. I mean, that would be my answer to the third. I mean, there's probably other weeks that I would probably go to. John 1:1 is easy. John 1:1 is my favorite to connect to that John would connect everything back to the Genesis and bring it forward. But you can rewrite that 1,000 times. And I think any way you teach it, as long as you connect it to Genesis, to Jesus, to Revelation, and you just see how everything is made new, and the light defeats darkness. The world is brought from darkness to light with God's word. Jesus is God's word. And then at the end, all of us will be called out of the grave, the darkness, to new life, into a new world, in a new heaven and a new earth. Yeah. I'm like, John 1:1. Pretty powerfully, in 3 verses, he basically just tells you the whole, like, gospel
Yeah.
story from Genesis through Revelation,
Yeah.
which is really, really cool. Which he hasn't even written Revelation probably at the time that he's written
Yeah.
that. So it makes it even more powerful than when he gets that. So
Sweet. All right, final question.
last question. Okay.
I know you talked a little bit earlier about kind of your hope being that as you're going through this, people are reading the Gospel of John,
Yeah.
and not just, hopefully they're not just at chapter 12 with us right now, but
I
maybe
hope they
have
read through
even
it several times.
Exactly. I know that even at the beginning, last summer, you kind of issued that challenge of people reading through it several times as you're talking about it. Beyond that, do you have something, just kind of a guiding hope for Kingsway, that as you're talking through
Absolutely.
this, you kind of,
I mean, it's at the heart of every sermon that I'm preaching right now is that they would not be distracted by the other voices that are going on social media, whatever. You and I have had our own discussions on where the Bible lays in the sense of like the actual Bible text, like the actual book. It has its own controversies, its own struggles. We've had our doubts with, the legitimacy and the historical side. But I will tell you this right now: the Gospel of John is such an incredible introduction to the person of Jesus that is the image of God. And if you just interact with that, I don't think you cannot not be changed.
Yeah.
And so every week it gives me solace to know that when I read a passage and I force them to hear Jesus's words and I force them to interact with this person that is Jesus, it just flies in the face of the things that they're hearing, maybe on a political scale. It flies in the face of their own fears and anxieties, flies in the face of their own convictions or frustrations, and it really deep down makes them answer really hard questions. Or it confirms what God has been up to.
Yeah.
It reinstates, or it resupplies, encourages, or, makes you kind of convicted in the sense of moving forward in the same light. Ultimately, it feels like I'm continuing to just do what John was trying to do.
Yeah.
And
I love that.
It feels just really, really healthy.
Yeah.
I don't know other way to say it. It's just like if you sat down at Christmas time and you read a story that your great-great-grandparents had read that had significance in the sense of what Christmas was about, and it had significance in your family, and it had been passed down, and your dad's dad and your dad's dad and then your dad, and now you had all read it to the generations below. I don't feel like I have to bring all of the stuff to the table. I'm just reading. And not reading, I'm reflecting and giving the testimony of John that was there. And so every week I have confidence that there's somebody that's probably going to get mad.
Yeah.
And there's somebody that's going to love it. And then there are some that are going to be just perplexed, not sure what to do with it. And
that's even almost a good place.
That's almost my favorite, truthfully. And I find myself in all four of those most of the time.
Sure.
I just find myself in all three of those, I should say. At camps almost every time I preach something. I'm really excited about something, really scared to preach something else. And then still a little bit like I'm not completely sure about everything that's in here. So I think if we go into it with 100% certainty, we got to check ourselves.
Yeah.
There's humbleness that needs to be approached in these types of things, especially life in general. So I would hope that as you're reading it yourselves, if you still are choosing to do that as a devotional or as just a study tool, whether you're just coming to listen, as we're going to continue it this week, I think in chapter 12 and finishing up chapter 11, I hope that it's something that you feel the weight of the lineage of the historical side of kind of this witness that John is trying to bring about, that you have to sit with. Very, very true. Is like, this is as close to video evidence as they had at the time.
Yeah.
And like, if you're sitting at a video wondering, was it tampered with? If it is real, what do I do with this? And then weighing what you've experienced in your life and what you've seen God do, and then using that as like kind of the secondary evidence of like, holy smokes, this could be true. And what if it is?
Yeah.
Powerful stuff.
Awesome.
Gospel of John's amazing. My first, second, and third John are very good too. I don't think we can jump straight to them, but they are fantastic little epistles as well, and chock full of some stuff. And you can definitely tell the heart of John is just like little addendums to what he wrote in his gospel. He's like, I just want to clarify, I want to throw these in, I want to just add a little something to it, a little salt. So Yeah, it's
Awesome.
powerful stuff. Well, thanks for giving me a chance to talk about this.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed it.
That's awesome. It was a fun discussion. I know. Thank you for giving us a little peek, being a little vulnerable there. I know that's can be difficult.
Trying to be real.
Yeah.
That's all I got, man.
Hey, thanks for joining us. I hope you really enjoyed the discussion. A little peek behind. I think it can almost feel a little recycled coming back to a series and maybe feel like, oh, they just didn't know what to do. But I know that there's some intentionality behind the choice to do that. And it wasn't just like, oh, I guess we can go back to John. We didn't finish that.
I wanted to finish it.
Yeah.
I'm really want to, hopefully we can finish it, but we'll see.
Yeah.
We may not get there.
Yeah.
I'd love to see comments on what their favorite sections were.
Yeah.
If there was a favorite section or something or a sermon, try to be gentle if there was one that you hated. Maybe that's the one that comes to your mind first. It's sometimes that way for
Usually,
me.
Yeah.
Or maybe there's something that you want more detail on that, I touched on in one of them or something. You're like, man, I'd love to know more about this.
Yeah.
Man, I'm always curious in that stuff like that too. So
yeah,
thanks again.
For sure. Leave those comments. Let us know what you thought about today's episode, what you've been thinking about, anything that you'd like to hear, just some random thoughts on. We're always game for that.
Absolutely. Any other podcast ideas too. We're always looking for new ideas and fresh thoughts. So for sure.
All right. Well, thanks again for being here. See you later.
Laters.